The day after finding the second baby American chestnut tree that was planted by squirrels in my forest, I went back to open the canopy to enable it to grow, which propitiously coincided with an idea I had already to do this in the very same spot to help the largest sassafras tree in my forest, which was being crowded by a swamp maple tree, threatening the survival of the giant sassafras, which rarely achieves such size in Canada. While preparing for the operation, I noticed an abundance of elm oyster mushrooms growing on a small stump, which coincidentally I had selected as one for growing mushrooms, but I had inoculated it with spores from chicken of the woods. Obviously, Mother Nature had her own idea, and now instead I found a bountiful crop of this delicacy. This is a great example of a technique I devised for growing mushrooms in the forest. The tree, which I felled last year to help the sassafras, was in a densely populated area with the right conditions for growing mushrooms, so I left a tall stump, counting on the network of roots and fungus to keep it alive. The tree responded by putting all its energy into growing suckers, while the upper part of the stump was abandoned, giving way to moss and decay, in a kind of living death, making it a welcome home for spores, as evidenced by the profusion of oyster mushrooms the very next year. Here you can see suckers higher on the stump that have died, and the wound where a sucker broke off is a perfect inoculation portal for fungal spores. Let's pick some oyster mushrooms. The small ones come loose easily, but larger specimens require more force to snap off. There are insects nibbling at this one, but most will run away immediately. Any that remain are usually easily removed, but if they try to hide, you'll need to pick them out. One of the best aspects of the elm oyster mushroom is how they are almost impervious to insect damage. As you can see, this specimen is fine for eating, so into the bag it goes. I'm breaking off the end of the stem here to show how perfect it is, right to the wood. Even this tiny specimen under insect attack is easy to clean. This very large specimen has discoloration from an insect attempting to bore into the fruit body, but it's clearly not a problem for the lower shelf. Again, breaking off the end of the stem reveals a perfectly intact stem, and breaking the cap in half reveals only minor surface damage, localized to the attack site only. There was practically no loss of edible content. And into the bag it goes. It's time to fill the bag. These mushrooms are not just easy to pick and clean, but they are also delicious and they freeze beautifully. After leaving some very small specimens on the log to grow larger, it's time to go inside for lunch. On the way back, I took a detour to check a few other spots in the forest, and I found a large specimen of Old Man of the Woods. As you can see, it has a very distinct appearance, and it was in perfect condition. This is one of my favorite mushrooms to eat. Let me show you an interesting characteristic of this wonderful mushroom. First, I cut it in half, and then we watch and wait. Very quickly, the flesh changes color and soon becomes red. This was a very mature specimen, so it was a little slower and not a deep red, but it was still delicious and completely insect-free. The forest is home to countless varieties of mushrooms, and most are dangerous to eat. Do not eat any mushrooms unless you are absolutely certain of their safety. If you choose wrong, you could die. The unexpected appearance of elm oyster mushrooms on my log intended for chicken of the woods was a wonderful gift from the forest, one for which I am very grateful.